All right, so in this week's lesson, we're going to talk about chords and how important they are when it comes to playing lead. And this is a huge deal, and it can totally change the way that you play. I used to think that chords were something that you only used when it came to rhythm playing. It was reserved only for that. And then when it came to lead playing, that was sort of single string things that you would do with bends and all of that. These were two different worlds, and I never could marry those two until many years later. And I wished I had learned this early on, because it totally changed the way I played once I could start to connect the two. And so what we're going to look at is how you can find chord shapes, visualize those chord shapes, and then you can start pulling melodies and harmonies out of them. And it makes that process so much easier once you can see it before you play it. That's really the idea here. And so I'm going to take everything that I played in the intro, which was all based on chords and chord shapes, and we're going to break it all down note for note. I'll explain where it all comes from. In this video, we'll go through the first half of that. If you'd like to watch the second half and learn how to play the second half and get the tablature for all of it, and the MP3 jam track, which I have in multiple tempos. I have a slow tempo version as well. And also the on-screen tab viewer, which has tab and video on the screen at the same time. It's interactive. You can slow it down. There's no talking in it, so it's just learning how to play the song. If you want that, you can get that plus all the other things I just mentioned by going to activemelody.com and doing a search for EP637. So the one thing I've learned through years of doing this is that there are some of you, and I fall into this camp too a little bit, there are some of you that are very literal when it comes to anything that you learn in music. Even if something as simple as a chord, there's 3 notes that make up a chord. And so if somebody says, if you see in a chord chart, for example, that there's an E chord to be played, you think it needs to be those 3 notes. It's a literal thing. It's an E, but music doesn't work that way. And actually, some of the best stuff that you hear, I like to think of this as you have representatives that represent your E chord. You don't always have to play just the E chord if the song calls for it. You could play an E7. Now, this is assuming we're still staying major if the song is major, or minor if the song is minor. Those are the things you can't deviate from, but you can work in an E9 or an E6 or an E7 and start working in these extensions to make it sound more interesting. And so it's kind of like if you're painting, if I were to say, paint a barn, you don't want to just dip your paintbrush in the red paint and paint a literal red barn. That's what a little kid would do. A more advanced painter would dip their paintbrush in red and then maybe in yellow, and you get sort of a mix of colors, and you start shading it with blues. And when you step back and you look at it, you've got a masterpiece. And that's kind of what we're trying to do when it comes to improvising, trying to paint something that's interesting. And you can do this. That's the important thing. If you are a literal thinker, you can do this. If you're able to speak and communicate ideas through speech, you can do it through music. If you could tell a story and make somebody laugh, like tell a joke or tell something sad and make somebody feel sad or even cry, you've got the skill to be able to do it with music. It's just learning another language. That's all it is. And so anyway, this song that we're going to look at is just a blues 1-4-5 in the key of A. So our chords are going to be A, D, and E. But they're not necessarily so literal. We're going to be playing like an A7 and a D7 and some of those things. And I'll explain all of that as we get into it. Let's listen to this first phrase and then we'll break it down. All right, so as I said, this is a 1-4-5 blues. Our first chord is an A chord. And here's going to be our representative for an A. I'm going to be playing in this position. This is an A chord using the E shape. I'm not going to be playing that chord. This is just the neighborhood we're going to be playing within. But I'm going to start off with this. Now that is also an A. Even though I'm not playing an A chord, this can represent my A. It's got all the elements that sound like an A. It's got the third, it's got the fifth, it's got the root. And you're playing them together and getting harmonies. So what I'm doing, I'm thinking about this triad that looks like this, the top part of this A chord using the E shape. And I'm sliding into the third. And then I'm going to play the fifth and the sixth. And then up to the 1, or to the root. So you can see I'm just playing notes that are really out of your major pentatonic scale, your A major pentatonic scale. That would be like major pentatonic scale pattern 2. But I'm kind of picturing, as I do that, I'm picturing this A triad here. And then I played that 1 and 2 strings together like that to get the Chuck Berry thing. And slide into it. So that's your first thing. Just get that and let that represent your A. And think about that, even if you get nothing else, just starting with that lick. If I were to be playing a song in B, a little blues in B, now you've got that little kind of intro bit, or you could work it into the middle of a solo, but it's a nice little phrase. There's all kinds of things you can do with that. And I want you to look at every one of these licks you're about to learn in this and think of them as vocabulary that you can reuse over and over again in different styles. Okay, so we hit that twice. Now watch this. So after this, we're going to come down here and play strings 2 and 3 on the 7th fret. I'll explain why in just a second. And then we're going to go back to the 5th fret and play strings 2 and 3, and then hammer on to that 3rd of the chord again. So that's the 6th fret 3rd string. So all together we have. And then the last thing I'm going to do is do an upstroke and hit the root, which is my A note. So when you play that together, that whole phrase, listen to that. I could come up to the 4 chord. See how that works? See, it's all based off the chord shape. So if I went to my 4 chord, which is my D, using that E shape, I could play that same little phrase. I could do it for the 5 chord. So it's representing my chord. I just want to keep nailing that point home so that you can see it's not literal, but it's art that we're creating here. Okay, so after this, I'm going to come back to this 7th fret 2nd string, and then the 5th fret on the 2nd string, and then watch this. So when I do that, I'm keeping the bar there on the 5th fret, strings 1 and 2, but I'm sliding my ring finger up to the 8th fret 2nd string and playing strings 1 and 2. It's kind of a clash of a sound, but I'm playing that, and then sliding back, and then back to here. And what I'm doing when I play that is I'm representing my A7, because that's the flat 7, that note. And when all I'm playing are 2 notes, the root and the flat 7, it's not a literal A7. It's missing 2 other notes. So you couldn't call that necessarily an A7, but you don't have to call it anything. You're just creating sound. And sonically, that is an A7. It represents your A7. So remember that going forward. If you know where an A7 should fall, or if you know where a 7 chord, a dominant 7 chord should fall in a song, you don't have to play all 6 strings to create the sound. You could just play 2 of them. The 3rd and the 7, or the root and the 7, right? There's all kinds of ways you can get at that. Here's another one, which we're gonna do actually in a minute. But as long as it's got that flat 7 in there, it's representing the sound of an A7. So the way that I played that phrase goes like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I did 4 of those twice, and I slid into it each time like this. Notice it's all downstrokes with the right hand. And then I went, so slid down to strings 1 and 2, and then strings 2 and 3, a little hammer on again, and then back to my root. So all of the rest of that is a repeat of what we've done. And I mentioned I would explain what this is, playing strings 2 and 3. That represents the 4 chord. And that happens a lot in gospel and blues and country and pretty much any style of music if you break it down. But if you're hanging out on a chord, like an A chord, for a while, like is happening in this, it's okay to go to the 4 chord and go back and forth from the 1 to the 4 chord. So when I'm playing this, that just represents my 4 chord. I'm not playing the full chord, which would be, that's my D chord using the A shape. I don't need to play it, I just need to play this. Sounds like it, right? It's enough of the sound to get that. And actually that works great in a lead setting. And I like to think of these double string things out of this E shape as sort of Chuck Berry territory. Right? All right, so now the song goes to the 4 chord, which is our D. And I'm gonna picture it in my mind, even though I'm not gonna play it here, I'm picturing my D chord using the A shape, which looks like that. Now the top part of that A shape, and this is key, looks like this. This little triad here. That's what we're gonna base the next section of this lead off of. Even though I'm not gonna play this in a literal sense, this is what I'm imagining. I'm imagining this, and I can see strings just 1 and 2 here. This little harmony, that's coming out of this chord shape. So now that the song goes to the 4 chord, I can come here and get that sound, that cool harmony. And I'm not having to think about it too much, I'm just picturing the chord. So all I've really thought about so far has been my 1 chord and my 4 chord. Or actually, even better, my 1 chord as this little triad here, and then here's my 4 chord. And everything else is just sort of pentatonic scale, or minor pentatonic scale pattern 1, and some of those notes around these chord shapes. So when I played this D chord, I went, that's just going back and forth between strings 2 and 1, with a little slide into the 2nd string. Now watch this. Now this is pretty cool, right? Notice my ring finger stayed on the 7th fret 2nd string. My middle finger goes down to the 3rd string on the 7th fret. And then I go down to the 6th fret, and then down to the 5th fret on the 3rd string. But I kept my ring finger on the 7th fret 2nd string the whole time. And what I'm creating, what I'm going for here is this. That's a D7. So I'm going into the sound of the D7. This is the flat 7 of my D out of this shape. Hopefully a light bulb went off for some of you when you realize, oh, this little walk down is just walking down to the flat 7 out of this, the top part of your A shape. So now when you piece all that together, everything I just said there, you've got. Now that sounds like a very thought out and sort of sophisticated soundingly, at least to my ear it does. But it's not, it's really simple. It's just this chord shape. Right? And you're just walking it to a D7. All right, so the next phrase goes like this. Isn't that cool? It's just chords. It's this. It's my D7 chord using the C7 shape, and this. My D7 chord using the A7 shape. That's all it is. That's all I'm picturing to create the sound of this. Now it starts with a single string line that goes. So that's 4th fret 3rd string, 5th, back to 4th, and then we come down to the 7th fret 4th string, and then 5th fret. So we have. Now from here out, watch this. What I did there is I went down to the 3rd fret and slid up to the 4th fret on that 4th string, and then played 3rd fret 2nd string with my index finger. What is this? Sounds pretty, right? It's a harmonized 6. Well, it's coming out of my D7 chord using that C7 shape. So I'm just picturing that chord, and then once I can picture it and I know how to get at it, I can play any of the notes out of that. I could play 2 at a time and create a harmony like this. Or I could play all of them. It really doesn't matter. So I played. Now from here I went and slid up to here. I used my ring finger and my pinky for that. That's the 7th fret, strings 4 and 2. And back to the 4th string. And then watch this. 5th fret, 3rd string. Now what is this? I'm just building this D7 chord out of this A7 shape. Just playing strings 4, 3, and 2. It looks just like that. So I really built this and then slid up here and played this D7 chord. So hopefully you can see it's just the chords. That's all it is. And these two connect nicely. This would be another like nice little takeaway that you can file away. So anytime you're playing a 7 chord, or representing a 7 chord, I should say, you've got your C7 shape and your A7 shape, and they connect nicely. And then you can go into your pentatonics right out of that if you want. And then I played a little bluesy line that's kind of connecting your minor and major pentatonic scale. I love this lick. I use this all the time. I'm doing a half bend on the 7th fret 2nd string. Just in your mind, connect it back to this E shape. So it's the 7th fret 2nd string. That's the lick. And then you jump down on the 5th fret to the 3rd string and slide down with your index finger down to the 4th fret, and then land on this A note down here, which is 7th fret 4th string. So now this note that you slide to is not in your minor pentatonic scale, but it is a major note. It's in your major pentatonic scale. So we're kind of blending your major and minor. We got the flat 3 going to the 2. That's all that is. And what's nice about going from your flat 3 to the 2 to the 1 is it works in a major key or a minor key. So if the song was A minor, you could go, right? It's gonna work. Or if it's major, it works in kind of a bluesy way because you got that flat 3. Okay, so now the song goes to the 5 chord, which is the E. And remember, we just played. Now to play over that E, I played this. We've already done this. This is nothing new, so that's good news. This is the same idea that we did down here. Remember, we played out of this C7 shape? Well, we're doing it again right here. So that's my E chord using that C7 shape. And I did the same little slide to this, in this case, it'd be the 6th fret 4th string. We came up here to the 5th fret 2nd string, back to that 6th fret 4th string, and then the flat 7, which is 7th fret 3rd string. So when you play it together, but you can see all I'm playing is the chord, just sliding the chord. So all right, so we're going to continue representing that E chord. We've already done this. Then I'm going to play this. Now this is coming out of something else that we've already done. So I'm thinking about my E chord up here. That's using the A shape. And the top part of that, right? You've got this, strings 1 and 2. Remember, we did this same thing for the D chord just a minute ago. Now we're doing it here. We've just moved everything up 2 frets. So to play that little lick, you can understand where it's coming from now. And hopefully you can file that away, that if you like the sound of that, that kind of major, sort of almost a little country sound, you can see where it's coming from. It's coming out of this shape. So I'm starting on that 7th fret 2nd string, sliding up to the 9th fret, 7th fret 1st string, and then slide back to the 2nd fret 2nd string, then down to the 5th fret. So it sounds like this. And then the song goes back to the 1 chord, and I just stayed in this neighborhood and went, right? That's where the song goes back to the A. So this is for the E. And I'm just going back and forth between this 5th fret and 7th fret on the 2nd string. And I'm thinking about 2 things, really. This major pentatonic scale pattern 2, these notes. And I'm also thinking about this A triad, which is I'm about to get to, right? The jam track's about to go back home to the 1. So that's where it goes to the 1. But I'm just playing the notes out of this, strings 1 and 2 here between the 5th fret and 7th fret. And so this is the part in the song where we're gonna go from the 1 to the 4, back to the 1, and then to the 5. It's just the turnaround in the song. And so when that's happening kind of quick in a song, I don't really think about trying to hit all of those chords as they're happening. That's kind of hard to do. So I just think of the key of the song in those moments, especially if the song is up tempo like this. The key of the song is A. And so what that means is I could just play A major pentatonic scale. And that's gonna work. I'm just starting on the A note and landing on an A note. And what happens with the chords doesn't matter. I'm not really trying to map them in that part. I could also play A minor pentatonic scale. And that would work. Notice I started on an A and I ended on an A. Same thing, I just went minor instead of major. Or I could blend the two if I want. Or, there you go. So you could blend them if you want. You could play major or minor. So what I ended up doing after the E as I just stayed really between the 5th fret and 7th fret on strings 1 and 2. The only thing I did that was kind of different there was hit this leg. I love this. This is one that you gotta learn. It's really important in the blues. You can see it. Well, really, what it is your 4 chord. It's like a D7. It's 2 notes out of that chord. These 2 notes. You got your flat 7 in there. It'd be kind of like going. So if we're thinking literal, it's A, D, A. But if we're thinking, bluesing it up and getting creative with it, it's right? See, you still got those 2 notes out of the chord, but it has a whole different effect when you're using it that way as more of a lead. So. And then all I did after that is I went from this A major pentatonic scale, pattern 2 Bach, this little area up here between the 5th fret and 7th fret on the 1st and 2nd string, and I did this little slide. And I love this. You gotta remember this one. This will be another light bulb for some of you. But if you do this little slide on the 6th fret 3rd string, slide down to your 4th fret on the 3rd string, and then come down to the 2nd fret on the 3rd string, what you've done is you've walked down this little bridge from pattern 2 down to pattern 1 of your major pentatonic scale. So I love that because you can connect these two via this little bridge here that's a slide between, at least in the key of A, we're going between the 4th fret and the 6th fret on the 3rd string. That's it. Once you do this, you're in another position now. Now you're in another, pentatonic position. Now I'm down in pattern 1. Same notes, but it's just in a different hand position. So and it's a different octave, so you get some different ideas. So I came down here. I'll put the tab up on the screen so you can get exactly the way I did it. And then the last note that I hit was that E note, because it's the final note in the turnaround, which is your your 5 chord there. And I just came down and hit that low E string. And that's another little technique that I use quite a bit when I can hear the 5 chord coming, especially when you're playing in the key of A like this. You know that that's going to represent your 5 chord, or the high E can represent it. So if you're playing a lead and you're just trying to get out of it, that's an easy out, especially if you can kind of work your way down the fretboard. Right? And now I can take my hand off and I can reposition and go into part 2, which I'm going to save for the second video, where we go into a whole new set of ideas. So if you like this video and you've picked up some ideas, leave a comment and let me know. I always appreciate that. It's super helpful. And come see me in part 2, where we'll learn a whole new set of ideas. I hope you're enjoying these and you're getting ideas out of them. That's the idea. It's not just to memorize something that somebody shows you. And it doesn't matter if you're watching me or anybody on YouTube. You should always be walking away with, how can I apply this to something that I like, something else? It's one thing to learn it. Obviously I'm doing this in hopes that you'll enjoy this and even subscribe to Active Melody at some point. If you don't, that's okay. I want you to at least walk away with ideas for how you can apply this stuff to other things. And that's what I'm always trying to do, is just give you all the tools I can. That's why I do the jam tracks and tablature, everything I can do that I can think of that can help with that journey. I know how frustrating it is. I remember being there, and I'm still there, actually. You never get out of it. But through the years, I have gotten a little better at it. All right, we'll see you in part 2.